your screen share? Is it coming through in Discord?
I can see it, yes.
Nice. Okay. Well, I think we can go live. Are you ready?
Cool. Yes.
Um, Let me just make sure the YouTube. Okay, it's there. All right, here we go. All right. Welcome to the D3 Meetup. We are live with Matias Stahl, who had to just walk a long time because of some traffic. But here we are, and we made it in here. We are live in Discord, so we could have some audio chat maybe later. But we'll start with a sort of a presentation slash interview with Matias about, how he uses Svelte and D3 together and how some of the patterns differ from vanilla D3 or other frameworks. So take it away, Matias.
Yeah, thank you, Karan. Happy to be here. And yeah, there was some traffic issues here in Hamburg, in Germany, where I'm based, but now I made it in time for the meetup, which was really
Amazing.
cool. Yeah, and I thought I bring some slides just about myself. So let me see if you see this. So can you see the
Yeah,
slides now?
nice.
Cool, very good. Um, yeah, so just a few words, a few slides about myself so that you understand what my background is. So I'm Matthias, and I'm originally not a data visualization developer, but I'm a biochemist. And yeah, I started out doing a lot of biochemistry. I worked in the lab a lot. I worked with bacteria, with human cells, and so on. At some point, I switched more into the so-called dry lab. I became a bioinformatician where I wrote programming code basically to analyze biological sample data, which was measured by high throughput technologies like genomics and proteomics and stuff like that. And yeah, and then I decided to leave academia and to become a database freelancer. So the reason for that was that during being a bioinformatician, I worked also a lot with data visualization. Of course, it was a major part of my job. And at some point, I realized this is something I should do 100% because this is the part of my job which made me the most fun. So I decided to leave academia and to go freelance. Founded a little agency where I did data visualization for like institutions, companies, think tanks, stuff like that. And during that journey, I got contacted by a large magazine here in Germany, which is called Der Spiegel, which is one of the largest news outlets here. And they were looking for someone bringing Svelte into the game. And so I started with the magazine as deputy head of their graphics desk. And later on, we changed structures internally and we founded a new department, which is called data and visualizations now, which I am leading since like half a year or so. So that's my background. And that's a recap again how it started at university, my data visualization career. So this is some chart from my PhD thesis actually. And later during my postdoc, which I did in Sweden, in Stockholm at Karolinska Institute, I did some more custom data visualization as well, because this was like the point where I realized that data visualization is involved in almost every breakthrough that we have as scientists. And we tried a lot of different things, how to visualize our experiments. And yeah, this is basically around 2019, 2020, where I really got in love with data visualization. Yeah, and then I started my freelance career. This was one of the first projects, which is a tracker for flight prices. Um, and yeah, that was really the first fun I had with D3 actually, where I really saw, okay, there's a lot possible when you use a low level library like D3. You can basically build what you draw with a pencil on a paper. And that was really fun. And I tried a lot of different stuff and also very artistic things I did with D3. So that was during the COVID pandemic, where I visualized data about coronavirus mutants in London using like the shape of London and experimenting with it,
That's
building
such a
some
cool
posts.
piece.
Yeah, and then I also worked for like institutions or NGOs. So this was um, I worked for an NGO that is keeping track of Iranian journalists and how they are prosecuted by the government of Iran. And they had this database for a while, but nobody was really interested in, and so they asked me to visualize it. And when we published this, there was a lot of discussion around it. So a lot of people looked at this data and discussed it. And that was, for me, the point where I realized it was the right decision to leave academia and to go for 100% data visualization, because I saw which impact you can have by choosing the best and right data visualization to reach people. Yeah. And then, like 2.5 years ago, I joined the news magazine, Der Spiegel, and they have a print issue where we do all the charts and visualizations, but they also have, and that's their main outlet, they have the website, which is one of the most clicked websites here in Germany. And there I got to work on a lot of also very custom creative data visualizations. So this was a piece about all the Nobel Prize laureates since 1901, where there were also some Germans. And so we wanted to tell the story where they are within the whole crowd of Nobel laureates and how this crowd is looking like. So this is like the different prize categories. And then, of course, we looked at women versus men. We looked at the age. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to work on this piece. And the cool thing is that there are so many people reading this story after all. So we have a very large audience, of course, and these pieces are often discussed here in Germany, in society or politics, wherever. So yeah. And these pieces are all built with Svelte and D3. So already during my data visualization freelance career, I started using Svelte. I saw it by coincidence, basically, on a live stream of a JavaScript coder. And he showcased Svelte and said it's optimal for data visualization because it was built for data visualization. And I really got in love with that. And yeah, it actually brought me to this job as well. And so this is a more recent piece we also built with Svelte and D3, where we use hundreds of thousands of data points. And here, every little circle you see is one building in Germany and like the energy status of that building. So if there is enough isolation, what heating it has, and where things have to change in future. So yeah, this is like the work we do. And of course, we also do stuff that relates to the current news. So this, for example, was a piece about dead Russian soldiers in Ukraine. And this is, of course, a topic where news avoidance comes into play, because a lot of our readers do not want to read more about this topic about Ukraine and stuff like that, because, yeah, there's a lot of bad news. And here we try to tell the story of these soldiers a little bit differently with um, visualizations that bring these dead soldiers as humans to our readers. And in the end, this was one of the most read articles in the whole last year for Der Spiegel, which showed us that visualization is really powerful to convey messages, to engage people, and yeah, to just make them very much related to the story they read. Yeah, and with all these pieces from the beginning on, we and I always think from the story we want to tell. So we think of like, what do we want to tell to our audience? Who is the audience? And what should we do? What shouldn't we do? Then on top of that, we build the design. And with the design, we try to evoke emotions, because we think that with emotions, you then can really reach your readers. You can really make them feel the story. Yeah, that's basically it. Quick introduction about myself. So if you want to reach out later, you can find me on higgs.com, which is my website. But now, Curran, we can look into some actual projects maybe.
Amazing. Yeah, circles with D3.
Yeah. So yeah, we heard here on the WizHub platform that you build, which is really great for building and prototyping stuff and sharing visualizations and collaborating on visualizations. Really cool, Current, what you built there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I'm so
Um,
happy you're using it and enjoying it. This is fantastic.
yeah, yeah, and I think the Circles 53 maybe is one of the most forked ones, the most forked visualizations you have, or I think it's like a really cool basic example how D3 works. So
That's right.
make this a little bit
Yeah,
larger.
just a
So
little bit of context for this one. So this uses the what I'm calling the version 3 runtime environment of VizHub, which means there's no index.html, but there's only an index.js that exposes a function called main that takes as input a DOM element. And the reason it's set up like this is to support hot reloading, which I think is one of the coolest things out there, and it feels like the future of coding. So I took a stab at making it really work, and so you can use things like the color pickers and the number draggers there um, to make
yeah, and it
updates.
automatically updates, right? When you change something here. So if I change,
Yeah, I can actually add you as a collaborator. Actually, let me see if that would work, just so you can make a few edits.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
and this is a nice example how D3 actually works because you have here an array of data which is specifying some x and y coordinates and radius for all these circles and a color. And then you have your SVG that you build there with, so first it's like the raw, take the data and append it to the SVG. So D3 is then making the magic to build all these circles on the SVG plane.
so you should be able to edit it now, and if
All
I
right.
make a change, it should reflect for you.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, I can see it.
So yeah, I'm excited about the collaboration possibilities with VizHub because everything is real time and the feedback is so fast. But so yeah, this is one of the earlier examples that uses this new runtime environment, and it is one of the most forked recent ones with 205 forks there. Um, and around the
Yeah.
time when I was spinning up this latest version of VizHub, uh, I got really excited about integrating Svelte because I know you're really into Svelte. A lot of people love Svelte, and it turned out to be possible to get Svelte running inside of VizHub. So I put in a bunch of engineering effort and got it to run. And it even seems to work pretty well with the hot reloading. And of all the VizHub users, you're the one that's been really digging in the most to the Svelte feature. So I really appreciate all the testing and the feedback you've given.
Yeah, thank you. And I thought that maybe a cool exercise to understand how Svelte works, we take like your circles with D3 example and transform it into a Svelte with D3 and circles example. So yeah, let's see. I just opened here another WizHub window, and I prepared this Svelte plus D3 raw repository here early today. And let's just have a look in here, and you can see that there's also this index.js that we just saw with the D3 example, but now there's like the Svelte setup code in here, which is like starting a new app, which is a Svelte app. And this app class here is coming from the file app.svelte. And this is now a real Svelte file. And as you can see, Svelte files are just a superset of HTML files. So we can use everything we know from HTML and CSS and JavaScript in here. So we can use script tags, we can use like usual HTML structure tags. We can also use style tags to fill in some CSS. And of course, I can basically write something in here. And yeah, it reflects in here so we can see it there. So
Oh, this is
Yeah,
amazing. I'm so glad we're starting from really, really scratch. We can see how all the pieces come together.
yeah. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going back to your circles with D3 and I'm just grabbing the data here because that's like the constant part. We want to visualize the data with the circles also in our Svelte app. And I'm just copy pasting the data into the script tag. So where I can write JavaScript. And now I have this new variable data that we want to use to build our visualization. And yeah, as said before, the visualization is basically an SVG, a scalable vector graphic. So that means we have to define an SVG here in the HTML part. And that's quite interesting here now with Svelte because this HTML definition of the SVG is not present in your D3 example because there we're using D3 to build the SVG and we're using D3 and JavaScript to append the data to this SVG, and then D3 is doing the magic of drawing all this. And this is what we call an imperative coding style. So we're telling like in these chains, do this, and then do that. And Svelte works a little bit differently. Svelte works with the declarative programming paradigm. So we are really writing the HTML that we're going to see later on. And this often makes it a little bit easier for people starting newly with D3 because they actually code what they will see later on. So we have this SVG here. And within this SVG, we basically need circle elements. So this is an SVG command which creates a new circle. All right.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Now, the thing with SVG is that it needs a width and a height. Otherwise, the browser will just specify some standard width and height. So I'm using now Safari, and I think it's just 300 times 150 pixels or so, what an SVG has by default. But we want to use like a width and a height, which is variable at its best. So because we want to build something responsive, of course, or we specify a fixed height. Maybe let's start with that for now. So let's say the width should be, I don't know, 500 pixels and the height should be 500 pixels as well. All right. And then just to see if this whole thing works, we're going to try to set up just a static circle. So every circle needs a center X position. Just use 50. And we need a center Y position, which could be 100 pixels. And then we need a radius, which you could just set to 50. And then we can see here on
Boom,
the
there
right
it
hand side,
is.
there's our circle.
Hooray.
Yeah. And we can already see that the coordinate system of SVG is a little bit non-intuitive because like 0, 0 is here on the top left corner. And then we are going 50 pixels to the right and 100 pixels down. And then there is the center that we specified by the CX, CY attributes here and with a radius of 50. Of course, we could specify another fill, like, oops, purple, for example. No, purple.
Nice.
All right. So what we want to have is now we do not want to have like this static circle with some random coordinates, but we want to have like here these circles that we specified in the data array. We have here X positions, Y positions, radius, and fill already, but how do we get that in here now? And now we're using something which is not HTML, but which is Svelte now. And this is an each block. So we could do something like that. Each data as D, and we can close this each block like that. And this just means that we are running through the JavaScript variable data that we specified here on top. And every object within that array will be represented as D here within our each block. So it's very similar to an array for each, for example. And okay, for each of these objects, we want to have a circle. So what we could do now is, instead of using like these static numbers, we could just say, okay, let's take D and grab the X property. And for CY, we can also just use D and grab the Y property. And you can see I'm writing that in curly braces. That's telling Svelte that, hey, you have to use now this specific element of the array where you are right now and fill in the data. Same for the radius. So we just use d.r. And for the fill, we can use d.fill. And if I store that, we see circles.
Hooray!
Yeah, but now there's a little problem because they are cut off now, the circles.
Oh, the width.
And that's because of our SVG that has just a width and a height of 500 pixels. So let me visualize that for you. So I can use CSS here between my style tags, and I could just say, well, grab the SVG and let's put a border of 1 pixel solid red. And now you can see, let's do 3 pixels. Now you can see, well, this is our SVG here, and it's just not responsive, it's just random. If we look at data, we have some circles that here have an X coordinate of 781 pixels, which is outside of our SVG, so that doesn't work. Of course, we could just say, well, then let's make the SVG a little bit larger, like that, 1,000 pixels width, working, nice. But yeah, we could build this in a dynamic way, of course. Or we could just look, okay, what's our maximum X, Y at the radius or stuff like that. But the best thing we could do is we could make this somewhat responsive. So it would be cool to just say, hey, couldn't we just fill in here a variable as well, a width variable and height variable that we measure somewhat so that we get from somewhere, maybe from some screen measurements or whatever. And yeah, that's possible with Svelte. Because Svelte comes with like batteries included for all these dimension measurements. So, but we have to do something. So we have to specify this width and height as JavaScript variables. So going to do is now just initializing width and height as two JavaScript variables. So in here something not very beautiful because width and height are just undefined right now. So SVG doesn't know what to do. So we have to get the width and the height somewhere. And a very nice thing we could do is we could like use here this main tag that I always use as like the outer container and let main fill the whole iframe that we're in here, so the whole space the visualization can have. So you could just here in the SVG say, hey, main should have a width of 100% and a height 100%. Let's just see if that works by giving main a background of green. So now you can see, okay, this is our main space, and this is the space we want to fill with our visualization now. So I'm just taking the screen away again. And so now we know that main has the right dimensions we want to have. What we could do now is could use a standard HTML attribute, which is the client width, because this attribute is holding the width of the main. We have to grab that. And now comes another Svelte feature, which is the so-called bind directive. So you could do something like that. We could bind the client width to our width JavaScript variable. That means whenever client width is changing, also the width, our JavaScript variable will change, meaning also the width of our SVG will change. And we will do the same thing for it, coupling it to the height variable. And if I
Wow.
store that, you can see now it's working.
That's amazing. It's so magical.
Yeah, so just taking away this border here, that looks a little bit nicer. So yeah, that should be like the reproduced example. I think, let me just see, you have another background color here. So you're using the SVG select, and then you're creating the SVG, and then you set here with the style method a background. I'm just grabbing that. And in Svelte, you do not do this imperatively with JavaScript, but you do it just with CSS. So you could say, hey, this is our SVG. And now we can just use the background property, transform it to valid CSS, and that's it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so this is how we reproduce this example. And it is already a little bit responsive, meaning when I change this here, you can see just scaling down. So
Oh,
because
that
the
just
width.
does the scaling. I guess you'll have to open it in the with that little
Oh,
full
yeah.
screen link in a new tab there. Then you'll really see. There it is.
All right. So I'm just doing like that.
Nice.
And you can see that nothing really happens. Um, the thing is that our main container is already responsive, but let me go back. But our data is not. So our circles will always be at these coordinates that we specified. And it could be that these coordinates are like outside of view. So here we already have a responsive SVG. Let me see if we can see that. So here's the SVG. It has a, oops, it has a width and a height. The width is 563. That is the width that we actually see, but the circles are not adapting. So, I mean, here, what how we want to behave it when it's responsive. So what we could do is basically we could like change the X and Y coordinates. So like when I make the window smaller, that all these circles move a little bit closer to each other. So let's try that. And what we basically have to do, we have to recalculate X and Y. And this is usually done with scaling functions that we know from D3, where we have like our data space and we have a pixel space, and we want to transform the data space, like these coordinates, into our pixel space, so the actual viewport that we have. And for that, you would use scale functions like scale linear, which comes with D3. Is imported. And with the scale linear functions, we could now write an X scaling function, which is working like that. So people who are familiar with D3 know that by heart probably. So with executing the scale linear function, like build a new scaling function, and we tell these scaling functions always a domain, meaning like what is the space of my data. So here we could just have a look what our minimum and maximum is. But what we could also do is like, let me find some domain for now that it's not getting too complicated. So we want to run this from 0 to the maximum X, like, I don't know, 2000 probably. And then we, with the range method, we can say, okay, let's translate that to some actual range, so available space that we have. And usually this is going from 0 to the width that we have, because we're defining the X scale here. And yeah, we have the width already in a JavaScript variable, so we can write something like that. Let me just make this a little bit clearer so that you can easily follow. So X scale now is a function which is able to transform X coordinates into actual pixel space, depending on the width that we have available. We can do the same thing now for our Y coordinates. We can also define a Y scale, just copying that, renaming to Y scale. It should also be a scale linear function. The domain here is going from, let's say, 0 to, let's assume 500. And the range here is then not 0 to width, but 0 to height. And now we can oops, sorry, we can use these functions to transform our x and y into new coordinates that fit to the available space. And here in our HTML part, we have the circle for each of these objects. And here we use just the x. So what we could do, we could just use now the x scale and the x property of our data point. We could do the same here with the y scale so that we get new coordinates. And if I save that, we're seeing a um, fun result here. And this is because right now I have defined this x scale and y scale just when this whole component, this app.Svelte, is mounted. And
Aha.
at that point in time, width and height is still undefined. So we're getting here basically some scaling functions that scale everything to 0. Um, and the trick is now, and this is now a basic principle how Svelte works, is we have to make this x scale and y scale reactive so that it recalculates whenever width or height is changing. And in Svelte, you make something reactive with a dollar sign. So we use the dollar sign colon, which is valid JavaScript, surprisingly. Labels, what is using that, but Svelte is using it. And if I store that, it works.
That's
Um,
amazing. Yeah, to me, this is the most wild part of Svelte, the reactivity.
yeah. Yeah, so with the dollar sign, you make this whole block reactive, and Svelte is basically looking for each variable that is in here, which is just width in our case. And when width is changing, then x scale is recalculated. That means if I reopen our visualization now in a new window, let's see if it is really reactive. We can already see that they are further apart now. And if
Yeah, that's
I
great.
have the console now, and if I move that, you can see that filling the full space available at any point of time, whatever I do. Well, same should be true for y. Yeah. Yeah, that's just by using these scaling functions that are recalculated whenever width and height is changing. Of course, we could do the same now for the radius, that it gets a little bit smaller when we have less
Hmm.
space, stuff like that. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Svelte in a nutshell. So if when the width
Yeah.
changes
And
by
so
itself,
this is all.
if just the width changes, the y scale would not be recomputed. Is that right? Each time you use dollar sign, it's like an independent reactive variable. Is that right?
Yeah,
I see.
that's true. Yes. Yes. I could have also done something like that. So could have defined x scale and y scale up here, and then move this whole assignments into one block like that. That would mean
Oh,
that whenever width or height or both are changing, then everything is recalculated.
oh, wow.
So that's the difference. And I mean, not that efficient anymore now, because when only the width is changing, then you only need to recalculate x scale. But in that example now, you would also recalculate y scale. So that's why it's better to keep them separate. Ooh, Control Z is working. Cool. That's the best solution.
Nice. Wow. So Svelte must be parsing what's in there and then identifying all the variables and yeah, Svelte does a lot of hard work.
Yes, absolutely. The thing is that Svelte is not a classic front end framework like React or Vue and stuff like that. It's a compiler actually. So on build time, all these dependencies are evaluated, and the output is just some plain vanilla JavaScript that is on GitHub.
Amazing.
Yeah, and that's just like the tip of the iceberg. Of course, you can do a lot more with it, and you can build very complex visualizations, applications, whatever you like with it. And this is just also using like one component, the app.svelte, to
So
also define more files. Yeah.
could we do something like make it so if you hover over a circle, it like adds a stroke? I mean, I know you could do it with CSS, but I'm curious what that might look like in Svelte itself. Um, and by the way, if you add me as a collaborator, I should be able to edit with you. That might be fun.
Oh yeah. So how do I do that? On
It's
settings
under
or
share
share? Collaborators.
collaborators, and yeah, just type Curran and click it and say done, and then now hopefully I should be able to make edits. Oh, it looks like I can. So if I say something like stroke equals red, oh, I have to say stroke width. Is it with dashes? I know in React you have to do the camel case thing.
It's with dashes because that's just HTML you're writing there. Yeah.
Or should this be 2? Or shouldn't it be like all like that? Okay, now they all have stroke. It works.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you want to have an on-hover interaction, you could just do that with CSS, of course. So you could grab a circle in the style part here in the bottom.
Oh, right. Yeah, we could just do
Say,
that with CSS.
yeah.
But let's say we want a different interaction that I'm curious to see how it plays out with Svelte and JavaScript. Let's say we want it so that when you click on a circle,
Mhm.
that circle has a stroke.
All right.
And so I guess we
So
would need to track it in a variable like um, clicked index.
yeah, yeah, just thinking about how we do that. So yeah, so first we need we need to grab the on
Ah, yes, let's start there. I love that.
and yeah. So yeah, in Svelte we have the so-called on directive to grab events. So we have to do something like that.
Oh, a colon. Nice.
Yeah, and then we can use JavaScript within these curly braces here. And so we could, for example, say, I don't know, we could just specify a handle click function, maybe.
Yep. And we could
Means,
pass in D. We have D.
yes, we can pass in D as well. So we could also look at this as an error function, for example, and we could pass in D. And then we have to specify the yeah, exactly. The click datum, that's good. That's a good idea. And then you could just define the handle click function in the JavaScript part as you would define a normal JavaScript function.
It's interesting that you don't have to declare the variables themselves as being reactive. So you just use let and it's automatically
Yeah.
reactive. So I figure we could define a function that just
Mhm.
sets clicked datum to be D.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then we could conditionally set the stroke width, right? D equals clicked datum. Then it's 4, otherwise it's
Yeah.
0. I wonder if that would do the trick. Hey, it
Yeah.
works.
That's it.
Haha, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty slick. That's pretty slick. I'm used to React, right? I'm a React developer, so to speak, and I'm used to having to do a lot of work whenever you want to make something a piece of state, for example, like the use state hook. Like in React, you have to use the use state hook for everything that's mutable, but this is just so much cleaner and almost more natural feeling.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it also comes when we're looking at the on click diff here or on the on directive. You use that because there's a lot of syntactic sugar possible in Svelte to modify these events. So
Oh,
sometimes what you do is that you want to call prevent default on your event maybe, or you want to stop the propagation of your event. And you have to write like this, like cumbersome JavaScript where you call the method on the event. But here in Svelte, you can just do something like that. Just
whoa, a
prevent it.
pipe.
Yeah. And you can also pipe a lot more to
Oh
stop
no.
propagation.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah. And
very
of
nice.
course, it's yeah, that doesn't get too verbose now, but what you also can do is, of course, you can listen for other events. So we could also listen for the mouse enter or mouse leave or whatever, and then change the color. Or, yeah, and so the whole thing is so that's like the signature of Svelte. It's always declarative code. So you code what you really see. So we code it directly here in the HTML basically. So we do not have to use like these long pipes of methods that you call on some JavaScript objects.
Right.
Um, which makes it a lot easier to already see in the code what you're building. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I see in your VizHub profile, you've got a lot of cool stuff. I mean, is there anything that you wanted to share from there in particular? Maybe we could look at some
Yeah.
more advanced stuff.
Yeah. So this is stuff I built on WizHub. So yeah, I tried actually a lot of stuff because I want to know how